So a couple things, last time that we met, we talked about some of the myths related to substance use issues. And I wanted to talk about some myths that surround mental health because, there's always this, like we talk about the pendulum and, people have this kind of conception of what mental health and mental wellness looks like. And as a counselor, mental wellness is really what we focus on, and yet it's often pathologized and stigmatized when people have symptoms that they don't know what to do with. And also trying not to, just fall into that stuff. So I wanted to bring up some myths, get some input from you all, and let's talk about these things and kind of explore it. I've talked several times about my own anxiety and struggles, and here I am. And so I am going to actually share my screen. So I've mentioned SAMHSA before. And I went on SAMHSA's website and found this great list that they have about mental health facts, myths and facts. So I thought, this would be a great place to start, to just kind of see, what people's experiences have been with this and what people have experienced or what they know about this. And so we'll just go through whatever we can, in the half hour that we have, and kind of talk about talk about these things, I think that's part of what helps with understanding stigma and, this whole pendulum experience about, the reality of situations and what we ideally want them to look like and be. We want to feel great all the time, and yet the reality is that we don't always feel great. And so how does that fit in with understanding, mental wellness, mental illness, mental health in general, things of that nature. So let's start with the first one. And I would love if you all chip in or participate. And let's talk about these things. So mental health issues can't affect me. Is that a myth or is that a fact? Anybody want to try?
I would say it affects everybody.
Yes, definitely. So mental health, does affect everyone. And they did a survey in 2020. And what they found is that 1 in 5 Americans experience a mental health condition in a given year. So that's, like there's 5 of us right on this podcast right now. One of us has experienced a mental health in a given year, and I've shared my story. So I mean, that's kind of the reality of the situation. 1 in 20, so 1 in 6 young people have experienced a major depressive episode. 1 in 20 Americans have lived with serious mental illness, such as schizophrenia, bipolar, and or depression. So a lot of times, and I think culturally too, this is very important, to be mindful about in terms of, oftentimes we may learn when whatever household that we grow up that, these are not kinds of things that we talk about or that we need to face, that it's a phase or it goes away. And, recognizing that mental health, mental wellness, these are all also brain conditions too. Chemicals in our brain affect us. When we have too much of a certain neurotransmitter or too little of one, it can, cause this pendulum swing and affect our moods, affect our thinking, affect our behaviors, things of that nature. I don't know if anybody else wants to comment on their experiences or anything. So we'll go to the next one. So, whoops. Okay, I think I clicked that a little too soon. So children don't experience mental health issues. Do you think that's a fact or do you think that's a myth? Well, it says myth. So we're just gonna go with that. But especially nowadays, with the pandemic too, I think that's an important piece to recognize that there's probably more of this that's happening. The anxiety of, social interaction. A lot of children have not been exposed to other kids because of the pandemic, have lived in homes that, may not have promoted things that they may have learned in school, things of that nature. So it's really important to just recognize that, mental health issues are something that even children can experience, and looking at, how things around them may be affecting them. And also, that there is a biological piece to it too. I mean, this is brain, this is genetics, this is also neurotransmitters, chemicals in the brain that, assist us in our functioning. That sometimes, some of us don't have enough of one neurotransmitter. Sometimes we may have too much of one. It really just depends on a lot of different factors that make that happen. It's not, due to someone's mistake or, whatever. It's just a combination of things. I mean, I know a lot of people that, have grown up in a very, quote unquote, perfect household, and having known them for a few years, and they still have some mental health diagnosed mental health conditions. So it's not a result of, well, you didn't have a perfect family or, whatever. But it's also important to recognize, how these symptoms and these conditions can affect people in their current reality. Because especially when we don't have support or care or someone to talk to about what's going on with us. This is why I'm really, I'm very big about sharing experiences and recognizing that, this is your experience. Nobody else can tell you you're not experiencing it if you are experiencing it. And so part of it is understanding it in the context, right, of your life, of what's happening at that moment, of how it connects with other experiences that you've had, and how it kind of unfolds for who you are as a person. People with mental health conditions are violent. So, this is a common misperception. And I've often heard this from people too, that, we oftentimes, I don't know about where you all live, but, with a lot of untreated conditions, that people will be afraid of individuals that may have schizophrenia or, are talking to themselves. And nowadays it's kind of hard to tell if someone is talking on a Bluetooth or not. So I don't really know how that works. But people that have mental health conditions are no more violent than anyone else. The idea is that very small percentage can be attributed to people that have a mental health disorder. And by all means, if any of you want to jump in, please do. With the serious mental illness, but they're most likely going to be a victim because they're more vulnerable. And I love what NAMI says. NAMI is the National Alliance of Mental Illness. It's a national organization that exists that has a lot of support groups for people with mental health issues. They, on their website, they also had a list of myths and facts. And I really like how they pose the question that, they're more people with mental health issues tend to be more vulnerable because we don't often talk about advocacy and how do you live and manage a condition and still be able to thrive in a world where it's so, stigmatized to have this. So that's one thing. I know for myself, just living with anxiety and trying to manage it and, having to really adjust different things so it doesn't create a lot more anxiety for me. That oftentimes it tends to be like, okay, I know I need to be the one that stands up for my mental health. I can always get somebody else, an advocate. I can get, my union representative if I need, or somebody's support, go to a support group. But ultimately that control and power is something that I need to do. And if I don't know what to do, then it's important to have people that you can talk with about what they do, which is why I think it's important to share experiences about, how have you handled certain things? When you need accommodations, for mental health issues or for substance use issues or for physical issues, what is it that you went through? What's the process? Because everyone's experience is going to be a little different. And yet the commonality is that these are things that we all face at one point or another as a result of whatever it may be. People with mental health needs, even those who are managing their mental health conditions, cannot tolerate the stress of holding down a job. I think this is a huge one. But, people with mental health conditions, again, this kind of goes back to the idea that when you're in an environment that's supportive, it's very thriving, right? And oftentimes, people may not know that employees or colleagues or peers that you're working with may have a mental health disorder or substance use disorder or a medical issue in general. But once it's known, what the research here in SAMHSA says that they often report good attendance and punctuality, as well as motivation, good work, job tenure. They're on par or excel more than other employees. So it's not that just because you have a mental health issue that, somehow it makes you less than. And that's something really important to be mindful about, because I think a lot of people have the misperception that because you have these things that somehow you're not going to be as good as someone who may have a mental health issue, but does not talk about it or, hides it. And yet at the same time, I think part of the challenge is how do we thrive and how do we create conditions that allows us to do that despite our limitations? That's part of the pendulum, right? Is that we want this, we want to be able to be productive members of society. And yet when we have limitations because of our human condition, we aspire to be better people. And I think that's kind of that pendulum swing. I mean, I know that's something I've experienced. I don't know about anybody else on the call, but I think that's part of what the experience is about too, is how do you find this kind of right condition? How do you go about creating it? How do you find the people to talk with or figure out what's going to work for you that you may not know about? And I know that's something like in therapy with many of my clients, that's what we talk about, options that may not be within a person's window of information, because whenever we're experiencing something, the idea is that we're also thinking inside that box. Albert Einstein talked about this, and Les Brown talked about this, and I love this quote, is that you can't solve problems, you can't, but I don't remember the exact words, but it's basically you can't solve problems at the same level of the problem. You have to think outside of that. Kind of a thing. And Albert Einstein said it, Les Brown said it, but it's just a really important point, that oftentimes being creative with what is it that we need to thrive as human beings and aspire to that, being a best version of ourselves. That's part of the myth of having a mental health condition and not the fact of having a mental health condition. Mental health issues are a result of personality weaknesses or character flaws, and people can snap out of it if they try hard enough. As much as I wish this was true, it is not, because as someone who has anxiety, definitely not something it just snaps out of. There's a lot of effort I put into being able to manage my anxiety so it doesn't get out of control. And it allows me then to be able to have some success with it. The fact is that, having a mental health condition, has nothing to do with being lazy or weak, and many people need help to get better. We talked about this with substance use issues, that having an addiction is not, makes you a bad person. It's the nature of the substance. It's the nature of the brain to be habitual in this particular habit, because it's getting what it needs. It's getting a chemical, it's getting a neurotransmitter. And so mental health conditions are the same. It's it's biological factors that play a part in this, that's listed here. Life experiences, trauma and abuse have also affect how the brain develops. And so we know from trauma-informed care and from the Adverse Childhood Experiences study, that when children experience a lot of trauma early in their life, it really changes how the brain develops. And there's a lot of research that points out that their limbic system, which is where our emotions are centered and where we feel emotions and responsible for our emotional reactions, does not have a chance to develop the way it needs to. So So a lot of it, people that may have trauma in their history may be more emotionally reactive because they've gone from, this straight, this brain-based survival to this extreme opposite of rigidness or, non-emotion or whatever the case may be. I've seen a lot of individuals, and when I facilitated a dialectical behavioral therapy group, DBT is really great with emotional regulation. I like the skills that it teaches. I use it often with clients. But, part of the nature of, the approach itself also talks about the biological underpinnings that feed into and lead into some of the emotional intensity that some individuals experience. And part of that is how the brain is developed. And then family history and mental health conditions. There is a genetic composition to both mental health issues and substance use issues. And a lot of people don't recognize that. So that's one thing just to be mindful about too, that, again, like we talked about with substance use issues, this is not about being a bad person or about a moral defect. It's not some sort of, something that you are. It is part of who you are, is having a mental health condition and, hopefully finding the resources to help you manage it more effectively so that you can do and be the person that you want to be. And there's lots of different options for that too. There's no hope for people with mental health issues. Once a friend or family member develops a mental health condition, they will never recover. I think this is really important is that, there are many people that have mental health conditions. Recovery becomes a priority is, managing, this relates to substance use issues as well, is managing things so that people manage their episodes more effectively and people can manage triggers and cravings more effectively. So people can learn and be full members of society and their community and their family and their social circle and their work environment that help them because they are in this recovery process. And there's lots of different pathways to recovery. In the substance use field, there's about 20 different pathways to recovery. Traditionally with substance use disorders, it's always been about abstinence, but that doesn't always work for everyone. And we know that just like with anything else, some things take time. And so it's a process of change. And anytime there's change involved, I love the, I wish I could pull it up or find it, but I think I may have showed it before. I love the picture that has, this big circle where it says where the magic happens. And then it has this little circle that says comfort zone. And it's like, how do I get to this where the magic happens? And it's that bridge, right? To get to that other side. That's like that bridge in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom with the alligators. You just don't know what's going to happen. And it's like so wobbly and so fragile, that anything can make it unsuccessful. And yet at the same time, we desire that where the magic happens, right? That's that pendulum. The comfort zone is our reality. Where the magic happens is the opposite side of that. And so it's that process of getting to that side where you have this nice balance. And I think balance is so subjective. I think everyone's balance is different. What works for me in keeping a balanced life is going to be very different than what works for somebody else. And I think that's part of the challenge is that, we try to live up to, everyone else's definition about what it looks like. And what I've found, and what I've worked with my clients too, is when they figure that out, what it means to them, and that's the path that they take, things are much different for them. That's something that the pandemic taught me as well is, really finding a different definition of balance. I ran across this quote that I've been sharing with people, and I really love it. It's by Brianna West. It was in an article that I was reading in the Illinois Counseling Association's magazine. And she was writing this in a blog and somebody quoted her. And basically the quote said, self-care, true self-care is an unbeautiful thing. It is not chocolate cake and salt baths. True self-care is designing a life where you don't need to regularly escape from. And that is such a great definition of self-care. I really love it. I don't think I got the words correct, like all of them exactly right, but that's the gist of it. And so I think that's part of, when we talk about the myths and facts about mental health issues and substance abuse issues, it's the same thing. It's kind of like, creating this life where you don't need to escape from. Because when we live in this world, when we live in a world that we create where we're happy and we're joyous and we're carefree, these kinds of things don't occur as often. And a lot of people that, when they're in recovery, whether it be from mental health or from a medical disorder or a condition or a substance use disorder, they create a very different life where they may still experience a lot of stress, or, the occasional blues, depression, if they have it, anxiety, whatever the case may be. And yet they understand or they work towards their own definition of what that looks like. Therapy and self-help are a waste of time. Of course, as a therapist, I'm a little biased about this one. Why bother when you can just take a pill? But the fact of the matter is that it really depends on the individual. And medication, therapy, both can be very beneficial for a lot of people. Some people, would prefer to have a pill, and yet I have talked with a lot of people that where they've taken medication and yet they still feel something else. Something else is going on for them. So they do come to therapy. They do want someone to talk with that's trained in understanding the human condition, to some degree. There's lots of different approaches that are out there from counseling and psychology. But recognizing that there is lots of different options that are available. The myth of I can't do anything for a person with a mental health issue. Support is really, really important. And this is something that, I've realized too, is just recognizing, just reaching out to somebody that, may be kind of struggling and just saying, hey, if you need to talk, I'm here. And let them make the decision if they want to or not. And, oftentimes what I get from that too, and this is not as a therapist, this is as a friend. I do this with friends that I know may be having a hard time, and just let them know, hey, I'm here to talk if you just want to vent or if you want to talk about something. If that's something I'm able to do because of my own energy levels and whatnot, I'm more than happy to do that. But the myth with that is that a lot of people then think I don't want to burden this other person. And I know many people that have expressed that. I've had clients that express this, I've had friends that express this, colleagues that have expressed this, that I don't want to burden this person, with my troubles. And I think the idea behind it is just recognizing people love to help. People want to help. We feel better if we know that we can at least listen to what's going on with you and be there and be present with you. I think that makes a big difference, is just knowing someone could be present with you. It's not, I think part of the myth with this too is that we always have to do something. Well, I have to fix this somehow, or I have to be able to solve this issue for this person or make them feel better. And as a support person, that's not something you have to do. Sometimes a person just needs to know that somebody cares, and is willing to just talk with them, whether it be just about the weather, but it helps pass some of the time, gets out of the mind, and just having a conversation with somebody. So that's something just to be mindful about too. There's a lot that you can do for a person that is either having a mental health issue or a substance use issue or a medical condition for that matter, just any kind of disorder generally, or having some condition that's present, someone that's having a bad day, and about it, just texting saying, hey, I just wanted to let you know you're in my thoughts. And, if there's anything I could do, I'm here. And what I've often found is that, when I do that with some of my friends and colleagues, is that they acknowledge that, and yet they know, that yes, I am actually here if you want to talk. But if I can't be there when somebody reaches out to me, I will try to schedule a time to do so, because, it's hard to predict when somebody is going to need somebody, right? So the last one is it's impossible to prevent a mental health condition. And this is actually a myth, because of the fact that there's lots of things that we could do, to help with prevention and also to help with treatment too. A lot of it is just kind of knowing what contributes to a mental health condition or a substance use disorder, and then educating people about it. We talked about that in one of these podcasts about how a lot of college-age kids don't really know even what a drink size is, and so without information like that, it's very easy to just make assumptions about things. So it's very easy for people to make assumptions about when they're feeling blue or having a depressive episode, or whatever the case may be, that they think that, things are very different than they are. And it might be, major depression, which is treatable. And so really looking at, how different things what are the risk factors? What's some general information about mental health conditions? How does just feeling blue differ from having a clinical disorder or, major depression? I think those are very important as well. It's very normal to experience a pendulum of emotions. It's very normal to experience sadness after a loss, when it's prolonged, and that depends on the person, is when we look at, okay, is this developing into something else, and what are other factors that are playing a part in that? So those are some of the myths and things that I just wanted to talk about, and see if anybody has any questions or anything that you want to share about any of this. We got about like 3 minutes. I'm sorry it took the whole time, but was curious if anybody wanted to share anything. Oh my gosh, did I bore you all? Now you got
No,
my,
no, it
like,
was so interesting,
just
Dr. Serena. It was very interesting.
I was
And
like,
actually, I was validating because it's May's Mental Health Awareness Month also.
oh,
So anything that you were talking about, completely relatable to at least the information that May month tries to tell its audiences.
oh, that's great. I knew that in the back of my mind, so it was really interesting that it worked out that way
Yes.
because I was not planning that. Okay, see, I got my insecurity got a little triggered there. That's all. So thank you for saying that. All right. So I do want to just make one quick announcement, even though we have like a couple minutes. I just want to let you all know too that I will be bringing on other clinicians to speak about their life experiences and how it relates to what they do and the work they do. I was talking to a few of them today, and I don't want this to be all about my experiences. I want you all to hear other people, other therapists, and how their life experiences have affected them and led them into doing what they do. And so I think I found some really great people that will be very exciting to have them on, later on. But I just wanted to put that out there. So then if you have questions, if you want to get in contact with these people, you're more than welcome to. But that will come in the future. So thank you so much for being present.
Thank you. Thanks. Have a great evening. So we'll see everyone in 2 weeks.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, Ali, Mai, and Lori for being here. I appreciate your support.
Thank you, Serena. Take care.
All right, have a good night, everyone.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Have a good night.